Your mother was murdered, Mr. Kong. And I believe you helped cover it up. The federal badge gleamed under the penthouse lights. Assistant District Attorney Evelyn Park stood in their doorway like death itself, her silver-streaked hair pulled tight, her eyes cold as steel. Yvonne felt her husband freeze beside her. 3 months of marriage, and she'd never seen that look on his face. Raw. Shattered. Dangerous. My mother died of heart failure. Seo Jun's voice was barely a whisper. I was 15. I found her body. Autopsies can be bought. Death certificates can be forged. Park stepped closer. Especially when powerful men want inconvenient women to disappear permanently. Before Seo Jun could move, Yvonne stepped between them. I'm his wife and his attorney. You're in our home without a warrant, making accusations without evidence. Her voice was ice. Leave. Now. Or I'll have your badge by morning. Park smiled coldly, placing a business card on the table. I've built this case for 15 years, Yvonne Kong, and trust me, you don't know anything about this man. When you're ready to learn who you really married, call me. Without another word, Park turned around and walked out of the door. As soon as the door clicked shut, an unnerving silence descended over them. What if it's true? Yvonne thought. Did she really know whom she'd married? Before we continue with what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like this video. Part 1 had you all in the comments asking for more, and trust me, this story is about to get even crazier. If you haven't watched Part 1 yet, the link is in the description. Now let's get back to the drama. Yvonne turned to face her husband. 3 months of marriage had taught her to read his expressions, but right now, his face was a mask she couldn't penetrate. Seo Jun, talk to me. He moved to the window, staring out at the Manhattan skyline without seeing it. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. She's wrong. My mother wasn't murdered. She worked herself to death trying to provide for me. Double shifts at the factory. Cleaning jobs on weekends. Her heart gave out because she never rested, never stopped, never put herself first. His hands clenched at his sides. I was 15. I found her on the kitchen floor when I came home from school. She was still warm. Yvonne approached him slowly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Then we prove Park wrong. We get the original autopsy records, the medical files, everything. We build a case so airtight that she has no choice but to drop this. You believe me? The question was quiet, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard from him before. I believe that woman came into our home with an agenda. I believe she's connected to someone who wants to hurt you. Yvonne's legal mind was already working. Think about it. 15 years she's been building a case? That's obsessive. That's personal. Someone is feeding her information, funding her investigation, keeping her focused on you. Seo Jun turned to face her. You think it's Richard? Your father has been suspiciously quiet since the scandal. Denzel fled to Europe. The company is under federal investigation. Richard Thompson is a cornered animal, and cornered animals are dangerous. If he's behind this, if he's trying to destroy me by desecrating my mother's memory. Seo Jun's jaw tightened. I will end him. Not like that. Yvonne gripped his arm firmly. We do this my way. Legally. Thoroughly. We don't just defeat him, we expose him. Every secret, every lie, every crime he's ever committed. We make sure the whole world knows exactly who Richard Thompson really is. Seo Jun studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased. You're terrifying when you're in lawyer mode. I know. It's one of my best qualities. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. One of many. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them had fully acknowledged yet. 3 months of living together, of learning each other's rhythms, of late-night conversations in the library and shared breakfasts on the terrace. The attraction was undeniable, but they'd both been careful not to push too fast. Their marriage had started as a weapon. Yvonne wasn't sure when it had started becoming something else. I need to make some calls, she said finally, stepping back. Get my investigator on this. Pull records. Find out everything we can about Evelyn Park and who she's connected to. Yvonne. Seo Jun caught her hand before she could move away. Thank you. For believing me. For standing up to her. That's what partners do. She squeezed his hand briefly before releasing it. Now let me go destroy someone's case. Over the next 2 weeks, Yvonne threw herself into the investigation with the same intensity she brought to her biggest corporate cases. She pulled in favors from colleagues, hired private investigators, and spent long nights poring over documents until her eyes burned. What she discovered was disturbing. Evelyn Park was indeed connected to Richard Thompson, though not in the way Yvonne had expected. Park was the daughter of a Korean-American businessman who had been ruined by one of the GMC Group's early real estate deals. Her father had lost everything and committed suicide when she was 19. She'd dedicated her career to bringing down what she saw as Korean organized crime, and Seo Jun had become her white whale. But more troubling was the evidence Park had gathered. She has witness statements, Yvonne told Seo Jun one evening, spreading documents across his desk. People who claim your mother was asking questions about Richard Thompson in the weeks before her death. That she'd found evidence of something and was planning to go public. Evidence of what? That's what I can't figure out. The witnesses are vague. Some of them are clearly unreliable. But there's a thread here, Seo Jun, something happened 18 years ago that someone wanted buried. Seo Jun was quiet for a long moment. When I was 14, my mother changed. She became secretive. Started hiding documents in our apartment. I asked her about it once, and she said she was gathering insurance. That she was going to make sure I got everything I deserved. Insurance against Richard? I always assumed she meant financial records. Proof that he was my father. Something she could use to force him to acknowledge me. His voice grew heavy. But what if it was something else? What if she found out something that made her dangerous? The implication hung between them, unspoken but devastating. What if Richard Thompson had killed her? Yvonne reached across the desk and took his hand. We need to find out what your mother discovered. If there's evidence out there, we need to get to it before Park does. And if we find out my mother was murdered? If we find out my father ordered it? Then we make sure he pays. Legally, publicly, and permanently. Seo Jun's fingers intertwined with hers. When I proposed this marriage, I told you it was a partnership of equals. I don't think I fully understood what that meant until now. And what does it mean? It means I'm not alone anymore. His eyes met hers, and for once, all his walls were down. It means I have someone who fights beside me instead of for their own agenda. It means... He paused, searching for words. It means more than I know how to say. Yvonne felt her heart skip. This was dangerous territory. They'd both been so careful to maintain boundaries, to keep this marriage practical and strategic. But somewhere along the way, those boundaries had started to blur. We should focus on the case, she said softly, though she didn't pull her hand away. We should. He didn't pull away either. The moment stretched, charged with possibility. Then Yvonne's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. It's my investigator, she said, glancing at the screen. He found something. What the investigator found changed everything. His name was Harold Kim, a retired insurance investigator who specialized in cold cases. Yvonne had hired him specifically because he had no connections to anyone involved and could work without bias. Your mother-in-law had a life insurance policy, Harold explained during their meeting the next day. A big one. $2 million, taken out 6 months before her death. Seo Jun frowned. That's impossible. We barely had money for food. She couldn't have afforded premiums on a policy that size. She didn't pay for it. The premiums were covered by an anonymous benefactor through a shell company based in the Cayman Islands. Harold slid a document across the table. It took me 3 weeks to trace the money, but I finally got a name. The shell company was owned by Thompson Holdings. The room went still. Richard took out a life insurance policy on my mother? Seo Jun's voice was dangerously quiet. It gets worse. Harold pulled out another document. When your mother died, the policy paid out. But it didn't go to you. It went to another shell company, which then invested the money in a real estate deal. That deal was the foundation of what would eventually become Thompson Properties. Yvonne felt sick. He built his empire on blood money. Not just blood money. Harold's expression was grim. I pulled the original autopsy report. Not the one that was filed publicly, but the original from the medical examiner's office. It was buried in archives, probably bribed to be forgotten. Your mother didn't die of heart failure, Mr. Kong. She died of a digitalis overdose. Someone poisoned her. Seo Jun stood so abruptly his chair crashed to the floor. He moved to the window, his back to them, shoulders rigid with barely contained rage. Yvonne dismissed Harold with a nod, promising to call him later. Then she approached her husband slowly. Seo Jun. He killed her. The words were barely audible. He murdered my mother, collected the insurance money, and built his fortune on her corpse. And I never knew. For 18 years, I thought she just died. That life was cruel and unfair, and that was just how it was. You couldn't have known. I should have. He turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes for the first time. I should have asked questions. Should have investigated. Instead, I took his money and used it to build my own empire. I became him. No. Yvonne stepped closer, gripping his arms firmly. You are nothing like him. You built something from nothing. You created jobs, supported communities, gave opportunities to people who had none. Richard Thompson is a murderer and a thief. You are a survivor. Yvonne. Listen to me. Her voice was fierce. Your mother spent her life trying to protect you. She gathered that evidence because she wanted you to know the truth. She wanted you to have weapons against the man who abandoned you both. And now you have them. The question is, what are you going to do with them? Seo Jun's jaw tightened. I'm going to destroy him. Good. And I'm going to help you do it. Before she could step back, Seo Jun pulled her into his arms. It wasn't romantic. It was desperate. He held her like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. And Yvonne held him back. They stayed like that for a long time, two people who had started as strangers finding something neither of them had expected. Not just partnership. Not just convenience. Something real. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal preparations and strategic planning. Yvonne worked with her team at Patterson and Webb to build a case against Richard Thompson that would be airtight. They had the insurance fraud. They had the shell companies. They had the original autopsy report. What they needed was a witness who could connect Richard directly to the murder. That witness came from an unexpected source. Margaret Thompson called Yvonne on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice trembling. I need to see you. Alone. There's something you need to know. They met at the same coffee shop where Margaret had first warned Yvonne about Denzel's plans. This time, the older woman looked even more haggard, as if she hadn't slept in weeks. I've been living with a monster for 35 years, Margaret said without preamble. I knew he was cruel. I knew he was unfaithful. But I never imagined he was capable of murder. What do you know about Kong Minji's death? Margaret's hands shook as she lifted her coffee cup. Richard told me she was threatening to go public with proof that Seo Jun was his son. She had documents. Photographs. DNA evidence she'd somehow obtained. She was going to destroy everything he'd built. So he killed her. He sent people. Men who worked for him. They made it look natural. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know at the time. I swear I didn't know. I only found out years later, when Richard was drunk and angry and he threw it in my face. He said she was nothing. A nobody. That she should have taken the money and disappeared like she was supposed to. Yvonne felt cold rage building in her chest. You knew for years that your husband murdered someone, and you said nothing? I was afraid. I was trapped. I had nowhere to go, no money of my own, no way to escape. Margaret's voice broke. But I did something. I tried to make it right, in my own way. What are you talking about? Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small electronic device. It took Yvonne a moment to recognize it as a hotel keycard programmer. The night before your wedding. The keycard that opened Seo Jun's door. That wasn't random chance. Yvonne stared at her. You arranged for me to end up in his room? I knew about Denzel's bet for months. I knew what he was planning to do to you. And I knew that Seo Jun was at the hotel, watching our family like he always does during major events. Margaret's voice steadied. You deserved better than my son. And Seo Jun deserved to have something good in his life after everything Richard took from him. So you played matchmaker? With my life? I gave fate a push. Margaret met her eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know what I did was manipulative. But I also knew that if you and Seo Jun met, something would change. You're both survivors. Both fighters. Both too stubborn to let anyone else control your destiny. Yvonne didn't know whether to be furious or grateful. The woman in front of her had essentially engineered the most significant turn in her life. Without Margaret's manipulation, she would have married Denzel. Would have been humiliated and discarded. Would have never known the man who had become her partner, her confidant, her. What was Seo Jun to her now? The question had been building for months, and she still didn't have an answer. Why are you telling me this now? Because Richard is planning something. I don't know what, but he's been making calls to old contacts. People who do his dirty work. Margaret leaned forward urgently. He knows you're investigating him. He knows about Park's case. And he's desperate. Desperate men are dangerous men. Is that a warning or a threat? It's a plea. Margaret's voice cracked. I've spent my life being a coward. Watching my husband destroy people and doing nothing to stop it. I can't change the past, but I can help you now. I'll testify. I'll tell everything I know. Just please, make sure he pays for what he did to that woman. Yvonne studied the older woman for a long moment. Margaret Thompson was many things, manipulative, complicit, calculating. But right now, she was also their best chance at finally bringing Richard Thompson down. I'll need you to give a formal statement to my investigator. Everything you know about Minji's death, the insurance policy, Richard's contacts. Everything. I'll do it. And Margaret? Yvonne leaned forward. If you're lying to me, if this is some kind of trap, I will make sure you go down right alongside your husband. Margaret's smile was sad and tired. I'd expect nothing less. Alright, I need to pause here because things are really heating up. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what you think should happen to Richard Thompson. Should he go to prison? Lose everything? Something worse? And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because we're about to reach the climax of this story. Now let's continue. The case against Richard Thompson came together faster than anyone expected. With Margaret's testimony, the insurance records, and the original autopsy report, Yvonne built a case that was devastating in its completeness. She worked with the district attorney's office, presenting evidence that made even hardened prosecutors shake their heads in disbelief. Evelyn Park, the assistant district attorney who had started the investigation, was furious to discover she'd been pointed at the wrong target. Her obsession with bringing down Seo Jun had blinded her to the real criminal. But to her credit, she redirected her considerable skills toward Richard Thompson once she saw the evidence. I spent 15 years chasing the wrong man, she told Yvonne during one of their strategy meetings. Your husband isn't a saint, but he's not his father. And that distinction matters. The trial was a media sensation. Richard Thompson, once a pillar of New York society, was paraded before cameras in handcuffs. The charges were extensive: first-degree murder, insurance fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice. Each count was supported by mountains of evidence that Yvonne and her team had methodically assembled. Seo Jun attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery behind the prosecution table. He wore dark suits and an expression of cold satisfaction as witness after witness detailed his father's crimes. Margaret Thompson testified for 3 days. She described decades of abuse, manipulation, and fear. She detailed what she knew about Minji's death and the cover-up that followed. And when the defense attorney tried to discredit her as a bitter wife seeking revenge, she calmly produced financial records, recordings, and documents that corroborated every word. Denzel Thompson flew back from Europe to testify in his father's defense. His appearance was pathetic. Gone was the arrogant, handsome man who had laughed about betting on Yvonne's heart. In his place was a hollow shell, pale and thin, clearly struggling with the collapse of everything he'd known. When he took the stand, Yvonne was the one who cross-examined him. "Mr. Thompson, you testified that your father is a good man, a family man, someone incapable of violence. Is that correct?" "Yes." Denzel's voice was barely audible. "And yet you're the same person who made a bet with your friends to marry, seduce, and discard me within 2 weeks of our wedding. Is that also correct?" Denzel's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. The question was relevant to Denzel's character as a witness. "I was young and stupid," Denzel muttered. "You were cruel and calculating." Yvonne's voice was cold. "Just like your father. The only difference is that he's better at hiding it." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Richard Thompson collapsed. He had to be carried out of the courtroom by bailiffs, screaming about conspiracy and betrayal. Seo Jun watched him go without a flicker of emotion. But later that night, in the privacy of their penthouse, he finally broke. Yvonne found him on the terrace, standing at the railing, staring out at the city lights. She approached quietly and stood beside him. "It's over," she said. "He'll spend the rest of his life in prison." "I know." Seo Jun's voice was hollow. "I should feel satisfied. Victorious. I've spent my entire adult life preparing to destroy him, and now it's done. He'll die behind bars, knowing that everything he built is gone. But it doesn't bring her back." His voice cracked. "My mother. She died thinking I would never know the truth. Died thinking Richard Thompson would get away with everything. And even now, even with him in chains, I can't. He couldn't finish the sentence. Tears streamed down his face, and Yvonne's heart broke for him. She didn't offer platitudes. Didn't tell him it would be okay or that time heals all wounds. Instead, she simply wrapped her arms around him and held on. "I'm here," she whispered. "For as long as you need. I'm here." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as the city glittered below them. And somewhere in that moment, the last wall between them crumbled. This wasn't a marriage of convenience anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This was love. The realization hit Yvonne like a physical blow. She loved him. She loved his intensity and his vulnerability. She loved the way he challenged her and supported her in equal measure. She loved the man he was and the man he was still becoming. Seo Jun. She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I need to tell you something." "Yvonne, you don't have to. I love you." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and powerful all at once. Seo Jun stared at her, his expression shifting from grief to wonder. "What did you say?" "I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was the first night, when you held me while I cried about a man who didn't deserve my tears. Maybe it was later, watching you fight for your mother's memory. Maybe it was always there, waiting for me to see it." She took a breath. "But I love you. And I don't want this marriage to be just strategic anymore. I want it to be real. All of it." For a long moment, Seo Jun said nothing. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Not the cold, calculating smile she'd seen in business meetings. Something genuine and warm and beautiful. "Do you know what my mother used to tell me?" His voice was soft. "She said that love finds us when we stop looking for it. That it arrives in moments of chaos and turns them into something meaningful." He cupped her face in his hands. "You arrived in my life at my most chaotic moment. You turned my plans for revenge into something I never expected. You made me want to be better than I was. Is that a declaration or a dissertation?" He laughed, and the sound was like music after silence. "It's me saying I love you too. Yvonne Adeyemi Kong." I love your fire and your brilliance and your refusal to back down from anything. I love how you stood up to Park and Margaret and Denzel and everyone else who tried to stand in your way. I love that you fought beside me instead of behind me. Partners, she whispered. Partners. Equals. He leaned his forehead against hers. And maybe, if you're willing, something more. She kissed him. It wasn't like their first kiss, desperate and drugged and driven by pain. This was tender and intentional and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. Take me to bed, Yvonne said softly. Our bed. Not separate rooms anymore. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He took her hand and led her inside. The months that followed were the happiest of Yvonne's life. With the trial behind them, she and Seo Jun finally had space to build their relationship without the shadow of revenge hanging over them. They went on actual dates, dinners, movies, walks through Central Park. They learned each other's quirks and preferences. They fought about stupid things and made up in ways that left them both breathless. Yvonne continued her work at Patterson and Webb, now a full partner with a corner office and a client list that would make any lawyer envious. Seo Jun focused on transitioning the GMC group toward completely legitimate business, a process that was slower and more complicated than either of them had expected but deeply satisfying. They also dealt with the fallout from the trial. Richard Thompson's conviction had sent shockwaves through the business world. Thompson Holdings collapsed, its assets seized by the government to pay restitution to victims. Denzel Thompson, stripped of his inheritance and his reputation, eventually checked himself into a rehabilitation facility for depression. Yvonne felt no sympathy for him, but she hoped, for his sake, that he would find some way to become a better person. Margaret Thompson, as part of her plea deal for testifying, received probation instead of prison time. She divorced Richard, sold the family estate, and moved to a small apartment in Brooklyn. She and Yvonne had a complicated relationship, but there was a grudging respect between them. Margaret had manipulated Yvonne's life, but she'd also given her Seo Jun. It was hard to hold a grudge when the outcome had been so unexpectedly beautiful. 6 months after the trial, Yvonne woke up feeling sick. At first, she dismissed it as stress or a stomach bug. But when the nausea continued for a week, accompanied by exhaustion and strange food cravings, she finally acknowledged what her body was trying to tell her. She bought a pregnancy test at a pharmacy 3 blocks from the penthouse, hiding it in her briefcase like contraband. She took it alone in the bathroom, hands shaking as she waited for the result. 2 pink lines. She was pregnant. Yvonne sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the test in disbelief. A baby. She and Seo Jun were going to have a baby. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. They'd never explicitly discussed children. Their relationship had been so unconventional from the start that traditional milestones had never come up. But now, looking at those 2 pink lines, Yvonne realized how much she wanted this. How much she wanted to build a family with the man she loved. The question was, would he feel the same? She hid the test and went about her day, trying to find the right moment to tell him. But every time she opened her mouth, the words stuck in her throat. What if he wasn't ready? What if he didn't want children? What if this changed everything between them? That evening, Seo Jun found her on the terrace, standing at the same spot where they'd first confessed their love. You've been distracted all day, he said, coming to stand beside her. Is something wrong? Not wrong. She took a deep breath. Just unexpected. Unexpected how? Yvonne reached into her pocket and pulled out the pregnancy test. She handed it to him without a word. Seo Jun looked at it, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes widened. His hands began to tremble. Are you pregnant? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. I found out this morning. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you all day. Yvonne. His voice cracked. We're having a baby? We're having a baby. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his face split into the most radiant smile she'd ever seen. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. A baby. We're having a baby. You and me. Our child. Put me down before you make me sick, she laughed, but she was crying too. So you're happy? You want this? Want this? He set her down and cupped her face in his hands. Yvonne, I never thought I would have this. A family. Someone to come home to. Someone to build a future with. My entire life, I prepared for revenge and nothing else. I never imagined what would come after. His eyes glistened. You've given me everything I never knew I needed. And now you're giving me a child. Our child. How could I be anything but deliriously happy? She kissed him, tasting the salt of both their tears. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Both of you. His hand moved to rest on her still flat stomach, and the gesture was so tender, so full of wonder, that Yvonne's heart overflowed. I have a condition, she said, pulling back slightly. Anything. If it's a boy, I get to pick the first name. If it's a girl, you pick. Seo Jun laughed. Deal. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though not without its challenges. Yvonne continued working through her first trimester, refusing to slow down despite her doctor's recommendations. She tried cases, attended meetings, and managed her growing client list with the same intensity she'd always brought to her career. Seo Jun, for his part, became almost comically protective. He insisted on accompanying her to every doctor's appointment. He researched baby products with the same thoroughness he applied to business deals. He transformed one of the guest rooms into a nursery, hiring designers to create a space that was both luxurious and warm. At the 5-month ultrasound, they learned the baby was a boy. Yvonne called her mother immediately. It's a boy, Mama. You're having a grandson. Her mother's screams of joy could probably be heard throughout Lagos. A boy. A boy. I will be there for the birth. I don't care what anyone says. My grandson will know his Nigerian heritage from day one. I would expect nothing less. Seo Jun's reaction was more subdued but no less profound. He stood staring at the ultrasound image for a long time, his expression soft in a way she rarely saw. A son, he murmured. I'm going to have a son. You're going to be an amazing father. I don't know how to be a father. His voice was vulnerable. I never had one. Not really. Richard Thompson was never a father to me, just a source of pain and resentment. Then you'll learn. We'll learn together. Yvonne took his hand and placed it on her growing belly. This boy will never doubt that he's loved. He'll never feel abandoned or betrayed. He'll know exactly who his parents are and how much they wanted him. The baby kicked against Seo Jun's palm, and his eyes widened. He kicked. He's been doing that all day. I think he likes the sound of your voice. Seo Jun's smile was wonder and joy and a dozen other emotions all tangled together. Hello, son. It's your father. I know we haven't met yet, but I want you to know something. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have everything I didn't. Safety. Security. Love. His voice thickened. So much love. Yvonne blinked back tears. Pregnancy hormones, she told herself. But really, it was seeing this fierce, dangerous man reduced to tenderness by the prospect of fatherhood. Have you thought about names? She asked. A few. He looked up at her. What about Jordan? No, wait, that's one of Denzel's friends. Definitely not. Yvonne laughed. What about something that honors your mother? Her family name? Seo Jun considered this. Her father's name was Jaewon. He died before I was born, but she used to talk about him. Said he was the only man who ever truly loved her. Jaewon Kang. Yvonne tested the name on her tongue. I like it. But maybe we could add a middle name too. Something that honors my family? What about your father's name? Alyawazian. It means, God is gracious. Jaewon Alyawazian Kang. Seo Jun smiled. It's perfect. A name that carries both our histories. The birth was exactly as dramatic as anyone who knew Yvonne would expect. She went into labor during a partner meeting at Patterson and Webb, her water breaking in the middle of a presentation about quarterly projections. Harold Patterson, to